Mount Vesuvius looms over.
This region is full of traces of the past, waiting to be discovered.
Just 28 miles from Pompeii, across the Bay of Naples, are the sunken ruins of the Roman port of Misenum.
It was the main military harbor of the Roman Empire, the basis of the biggest fleet of this time.
In AD 79, the Roman writer Pliny the Younger is here, visiting his uncle, the admiral of the fleet.
Pliny is just sitting on the terrace of his villa.
News of a brutal
When he
murder
noticed something
is
strange and
always
amazing,
shocking.
Cordon has gone up around the building.
Big cloud is exploding from the top of the Vesuvius. Creating the shape of a very high pine
Here,
tree.
we're all one. Everybody's here, but their attention.
Pliny records every detail as he watches the drama unfold. Today, he lends his name to this deadly type of eruption. Pompeii,
He's witnessing the beginning
an
of a
ever-present
Plinian
reminder
eruption.
of the disaster of AD 79.
So this would be his...
Mount Vesuvius looms over the ruined city of Pompeii. An ever-present reminder of the disaster of AD 79. Every year, Neapolitans still pray to their patron saint to keep them safe from the volcano. But 2,000 years ago, it was a catastrophe nobody saw coming.
For the people here, they didn't know, probably, that Vesuvius was a volcano. They didn't know the danger. They basically didn't know what was getting at them.
For 18 hours, Vesuvius rained pumice and ash onto the city.
Decision-making during the eruption for the people of Pompeii was incredibly challenging. There were still earthquakes, people would have been disorientated. The mushroom of ash would have been spreading across the sky towards the city, starting to turn day into night. Several hours of ashfall would have made these streets unrecognizable to the residents of Pompeii. Ash would have built up high above the road, up along the walls, flanking this main thoroughfare out of the city.
Hundreds perished as roofs and buildings collapsed. But for any survivors, there seemed to be a glimmer of hope.
At 1 o'clock in the morning, there was a pause in the eruption. That ash stopped falling from the sky. At that moment, people maybe thought that the eruption had finished and that it was safe to stay. But something worse was about to happen. As the volcano's eruptive behavior started to change, another new deadly hazard started to arrive into the city of Pompeii.
Pompeii had entered its final hours. In Pompeii, the biggest dig in a generation is reaching its climax. For over a year, an all-Italian team of archaeologists have been unearthing an entire city block, known as Insula 10. In a complex of buildings beneath the pumice, a large brick-built oven led to the discovery of a commercial bakery.
No, veramente bello.
In a small room close by, the team found the crushed remains of 2 women and a child.
Mamma mia.
Probably enslaved workers. Next door, an atrium, or reception area, was under renovation at the time of the eruption.
Questa casa era cantierizzata, non ci stanno santi, eh?
Here, the team discovered expensive marble furniture and brightly colored frescoes, including one resembling a pizza. With a third building housing a high-end laundry. The team believed the same man owned the entire complex. And they found his initials, ARV, on a bakery millstone.
Avere quasi un contatto con una persona che non c'è più, ma che ha lasciato tracce ovunque.
Now the excavation is expanding to a new area behind the bakery site. A grand building with spacious rooms. As the first wall paintings are revealed, it's clear this is an opulent house once owned by a very rich person. Could this be the home of the mysterious ARV?
It's always fascinating seeing new things because it's like slowly emerging pieces of a great puzzle. And we want to understand how these people lived, how the house was organized. It's really like a story coming to light.
Underneath a large staircase, the team have found something unique. The first of its kind in Pompeii.
Buongiorno ragazzi, come va?
Buongiorno Gennaro, vieni un po' a vedere, vai.
Che è successo?
C'è una novità. Guarda un po'. Guarda un po'.
Caspita.
Col carboncino.
Intonaco grezzo.
Sull'intonaco grezzo, carboncino. Sembrerebbero 2 guerrieri o...
Pure
anche da quest'altra parte, sì.
Secondo me sono gladiatori.
Sembrerebbe come sono vestiti, dagli scudi.
Eppure a livello di come è disegnata,
Sì.
Il corpo è proporzionato, anche la cura dei particolari.
Sì.
Chi l'ha fatta è un bravo disegnatore.
Un bravo disegnatore.
Sì, e conosceva i personaggi che si combattevano. Questi hanno disegnato i loro idoli.
O i loro idoli.
Anche perché questi erano come gli attuali calciatori, no?
Sì.
Gladiators were celebrated icons of the Roman world, worshipped as superstar athletes. Archaeologists have found their images across Pompeii. From colorful tomb paintings to graffiti scratched into walls. But what makes these images so special is that the artist drew them in charcoal.
Il carboncino è molto delicato, molto labile, facilmente si polverizza. Questo significa che chi ha disegnato l'ha fatto
soltanto attimi primi, momenti primi, il giorno prima che l'eruzione coprisse tutto.
What inspired the mystery artist to draw these images just before the eruption? A stone's throw from the dig is Pompeii's amphitheatre. In AD 79, it regularly held gladiatorial contests. Are the images a record of a fight that took place here?
We may not be in Rome, but we're still in an incredible amphitheater. And even though it isn't the Colosseum, the great thing about Pompeii is that it's smaller, it's more intimate. So wherever you are, even at the cheap seats, you're getting a fantastic view of the actual games themselves. The amphitheater is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter what your position is in society. Here, we're all one. Everybody's here, but their attention is on the infamous. Here, it is the lowest of the low, the gladiators, that commands the attention of every echelon of Roman society. And right here was our artist. You can imagine he's walked up the same steps we have, come out here, probably with some friends. As you sat down, the music's building up, but the roar of the crowd, you really would have felt it in your bones. This is just etched into this artist's memory. These are incredible snapshots of a moment lost in time until recently. Without these, we would never have known of this incredible match that took place. So you've got two very popular types of gladiators. You've got the Thracian. He's kind of like the middleweight. He has a brimmed helmet with a nice crest and feathers. We can see he's got a smaller shield, and he's got his signature weapon, the Sica. It's this little sword here, this little line. Simple line, but it gives away exactly who it is. One of the most dangerous weapons in the arena. He's fighting against the Murmillo, the tank, the armored tank of the gladiators. He's got the scutum. You can see big shield. Now, the scutum is really a weapon of the Roman army. And this is the opening moment. It's the moment that they've squared off in front of each other. They're going to start sparring. They're going to start sizing each other up. But then the second part, what we have is the culmination. The end knockout where he's hit the shield out of the opponent gladiator's hand, the clash of the swords, the winning moment. The triumph of one gladiator, and on the other side, the disappointment of the other. I would say that this is his gladiator. This is his man. And he, at the end of the day, has gone home, and he's just wanted to remember it, and there he is, just with a little piece of charcoal, immortalizing this moment. The crazy thing is that, unbeknownst to this artist and the spectators, their doom is behind them. That Vesuvius is secretly looming, and it's going to end everything, and it's going to entomb them, and it's going to survive this moment for us to find 2,000 years later.
"18 hours after the eruption started, it began to subside. And as the huge mushroom cloud of rock and ash became unstable, it collapsed, creating deadly burning avalanches that swept down the mountainside. Known as pyroclastic flows, they are unstoppable and unsurvivable.
Their temperature can be a few hundreds of degrees Celsius, and they can move several tens of miles per hour, much faster than we'd be able to run. It was the horrendous way to die. Not only is the flow hot, the gases within it are enough to poison you from the inside. They suffocate you and they damage your lungs and all of your respiratory system. Breathing that air in was impossible. But fortunately for the residents of Pompeii, it didn't enter their city. It actually went along the coastline into the settlement of Herculaneum. The residents of Pompeii were spared that first onslaught.
At the dig, the team have discovered an unusually large relief. It is an extraordinary and rare find. A three-dimensional snake. Found in one of the last unexcavated rooms within the bakery complex. Snakes were the guardian deities of the home, often decorating shrines and altars. And this one is not alone.
Dammi una mano.
Una mano?
Sì. Il gemello?
Sembra proprio una testa.
Marco, mi dai una mano? Raccogliamo un po'. Lo so, vai, vai. Piano piano, lo so. Vai Marco, vai. È più piccolo o uguale proprio di misura?
Beh, forse un po' più piccola, non saprei, insomma.
Speriamo che sia integro rispetto a questo. La mamma e il figlioletto, no?
Quindi ci manca un altarino. Lo troviamo un altare?
C'è tutto lo spazio.
Speriamo.
To find a shrine with an altar would prove this room was used to make offerings to the gods, and would have been one of the most important places in the house.
The private home, the house, the family, is a special space in religious terms. For the ancient mentality, everything was somehow sacred. You had gods living on the mountains, nymphs living in the waters, in the rivers, in trees. The planets were named after divinities, Venus and so forth. And the snake somehow connects the underground with humans. And so it brings abundance, wealth. It stands for the good spirit. And they are often depicted on the altar.
Mio padre aveva un pezzo di terreno in montagna e usciva sempre un serpente con la testa grossa e corto e diceva che era un serpente antico e loro lo avevano come augurio, si diceva augurio,
certo.
augurio.
E perché quello...
E non lo toccavano mai.
Mai?
Perché dice che se moriva quello...
Il serpente è simbolo di prosperità e di ricchezza, quindi non si tocca.
The discovery of 2 snakes in relief is another first for Pompeii. And just below, the team uncover what they were looking for. A shrine and small altar with a 3rd painted snake. Dr. Valentino Gasparini is an expert in Roman religion. He's keen to understand why the house owner sought so much divine protection.
Allora, wow. Che spettacolo. Non esiste niente di questo tipo.
No, per ora è l'unico conservato.
Quindi un solo serpente Genius Loci, con tutte le decorazioni classiche, con la loro crestina rossa, la loro barbetta rossa.
E poi questo è bellissimo. L'altare dove veniva fatto il sacrificio è la sua rappresentazione immediatamente sopra.
Diretta, certo. Ricorrere a una strategia di ricerca di una protezione divina così imponente, direi monumentale, perché, ripeto, non esistono cose di questo tipo qua a Pompei, è come dire, è come metterci, insomma, un peso da 90, come si può dire, no?
Hanno bisogno di molte protezioni. La casa, il panificio, la lavanderia.
Evidentemente. In questo caso versando non si capisce bene cosa, ma non credo sia carne, ma magari versando qualche frutto.
Sì, forse dalla
da una patera
sì.
lì. Non credo abbiate avuto la fortuna di trovare dei resti
in
botanici.
realtà sì.
Previously, most of the offerings found in shrines in Pompeii contained just vegetable matter. But in the lab, the team have discovered something unusual.
E quindi qui vedi ci sono i reperti recuperati dallo scavo dell'Arario. Quindi abbiamo questa frutta secca, quindi le noci per esempio, abbiamo bratte, pinoli, i fichi, i datteri e poi c'era una grande presenza di nocciole di olive e di scarti di lavorazione dell'oliva e quindi veniva utilizzato come combustibile.
Comunque io ho qualche cambiamento, cioè ho sempre il guscio dell'uovo, però poi ci sono dei cambiamenti come le vertebre di pesci, ma pesci piccolissimi, e poi qualche frammento di ossa di mammifero. Questo dovrebbe essere il primo esempio in cui si trovano resti faunistici associati a resti vegetali.
Sì, evidentemente sono nuovi in questo caso, quindi come il pesce.
Sì, come il pesce, sì. Chissà chi ha officiato questa offerta all'Arario.
È difficile dirlo. Potrebbero essere stati proprietari della casa, magari come ultima offerta.
Per ora non è stato trovato in altri larari pompeiani.
Was this shrine offering a never-before-seen mixture of fruit, meat and fish? A last desperate attempt to appease the gods amidst the eruption?
La paura, la richiesta di protezione, la necessità di protezione da qualcosa che per loro non poteva essere compreso pienamente, forse.
E in fondo, se ci pensi, siamo le prime a vedere quello che era stato posto in questo larario. Ed è estremamente emozionante.
Rituals and offerings weren't the only way the ancient Romans sought protection. Amulets and lucky charms were worn to guard against misfortune. This one, left behind by a fleeing Pompeian, has multiple deities on a single talisman.
You can see here there is a serpent coiling around this tree. There is a bird, probably an eagle. There is a dog. There is also this ring, which gives the possibility, while escaping from Pompeii, to bring with them some divine, overpowerful in this case, figurines. Of course, we cannot not mention one bodily member which is particularly effective in protection, the male genitalia, the phallus in whatever size, shape. We have bronze phalluses, bone phalluses, golden phalluses, winged phalluses, and the basic function of these small objects was quite clear. Provide protection for the own life of the user of this object against the bad spirits. And what we have here is a necklace which has been found here in Pompeii with a set of 8 pieces, and in this case it's quite interesting to see how the every single bone piece of this necklace is shaped as a double phallus. We have to imagine our Pompeians trying to escape from a disaster and quickly having to find some objects to bring with them, protecting their new life, and so probably hoping also in the favor of the gods in order to survive to the disaster.
At At the dig site, in a bedroom just off the atrium, the team have found more evidence that reveals the panic in Pompeii's final hours.
In questo ambiente si è sviluppato un incendio. Avevamo visto una serie di tracce di bruciato, dei resti carboniosi lungo le pareti. Le parti in legno del mobilio si sono carbonizzate e subito dopo è crollato il soffitto affrescato della stanza, che è crollato al di sopra di queste evidenze.
It is extremely rare to find remains of Roman furniture, because normally wood decays quickly. But here, the charred remains of this bed were preserved by the fire itself.
È incredibile perché riusciamo a ricostruire la sagoma della spalliera del letto e la dimensione del letto, perché abbiamo la posizione dei piedi, delle staffe di legno che collegavano i piedi di metallo. Ne abbiamo una qui, molto ben evidente, e un'altra lì, rimasta come un'impronta, quindi abbiamo delle misure precise del letto, e poi lì si sono conservate le tracce di questi cuscini in lana all'interno di un rivestimento di tela che assomiglia alla nostra tela di sacco, quindi una tela con una trama molto, molto larga. Come si è sviluppato un incendio non ne siamo certi, però possiamo pensare a piccole scosse di terremoto che fanno cadere una lucerna piena d'olio per terra vicino a un mobile e si sviluppa un incendio.
Over the years, archaeologists in Pompeii have found dozens of different types of Roman oil lamps.
Queste sono una serie di lucerne di piccolo formato, di tipologia comune. Era il modo più diffuso di illuminare gli ambienti la sera, al calare del sole. La lucerna che riteniamo responsabile dell'incendio all'interno della camera da letto probabilmente era una lucerna di questa tipologia, che cadendo con il suo olio bollente provoca quell'incendio qui a Pompei.
I think it was like hell on earth. You imagine here a fire, roofs collapsing, people screaming, trying to escape, others hiding. Some believed the world was going to end, and others that the gods didn't exist anymore or had withdrawn from the world. There's a new eternal darkness.
Despite the widespread panic, the city escaped the full force of the first 3 deadly pyroclastic flows as they headed west into the town of Herculaneum. But as dawn broke, Pompeii's luck ran out.
The 4th pyroclastic flow headed southeastwards towards Pompeii. The air would have been thick with the smell of sulfur dioxide, a very strong eggy smell. And if they thought the ash and pumice raining on their roofs was bad, this was something else entirely. Anybody who was still alive and not been killed by a collapsing roof would have seen almost like a cloud coming down the volcano towards them. It would have been almost imperceptible. It was so far away how fast moving it was.
As the superheated avalanche crashed into the city, it killed and buried everything in its path. Today, we can see evidence of the power and ferocity of these pyroclastic flows.
These rocks here do tell us an important part of the story of the eruption. In the lower part of this exposure of rock, we're seeing these pumice-rich ash deposits from the volcano during the earlier phase of the eruption. But here we have quite a different rock type. This rock here has these really obvious lines, these sub-horizontal lines within it, called lamination. And they form by fast-moving flows, so flows that are moving so fast that you can't build ripples or little dunes. You actually just flatten the sediments out. And these rocks were deposited by one of these pyroclastic flows. And it's haunting to think that a seemingly inconsequential 1 meter thick package of rock caused such chaos and death. Because even if you were able to climb out of this lower package of ash, I'd have been up to my chest and my head would have been sticking out of it. If I was lucky and I was strong, I could have clambered up to the top of that layer, but then suddenly the surge, the pyroclastic flow, would have just swept me off my feet, and that would have been the end of me.
In the 1960s, archaeologists found a group of individuals buried in the ash, discovered close to the southern gate. Today, we know them as the fugitives. Experts believe they survived the first phase of eruption, only to be caught by the deadly pyroclastic flow.
You have here an entire community, a small family perhaps. There are older people, there are younger people. There is somebody who was a little over a year old who would not have been able to walk, who would have been carried. They grouped. They were not dead in an hour from the start of the eruption. They survived until the next morning. So they had a lot of time to think about what was happening and about how they could possibly respond to what was unfolding. Maybe the most direct parallel that we have is what happened in the Twin Towers after the 9/11 attacks. Because that also was a situation that was unknown to people. People understood what had happened to some extent, but they didn't know the buildings would collapse. And it's very hard to imagine how you respond then. So some people immediately started to find their way to safety, maybe up to half, but the other half did not. And there's at least a third of all people who waited more than 5 minutes. And we know of one group of about 16 people in one of the towers. They got together in a conference room, had a conversation about the situation for about an hour, and then decided to leave the building. And think about what that might mean in a situation like in Pompeii, where you have very little time to decide. There will have been panic. There will have been fear. There will have been a lot of uncertainty. What are we going to do now? How are we going to get out? When is the right moment? But people stick together because you want to be with the people that you're most familiar with in the circumstances. I think what this teaches us about us as human beings is that we are fundamentally social beings, and we are fundamentally beings who are rooted in familiarities. So come a moment where you have no reference framework. You're starting to count your familiarities. You're going to go back to a place that you understand. but also you're going to take care of the people you know. So suppose I would be in a situation like that, I would immediately run for my family and make sure they were safe. But for these fugitives, it wasn't a straightforward decision process. It wasn't that you could make a right decision, you simply had to be lucky, and these people were unlucky. They were trying to navigate the crisis, and it didn't work out.
While we may never know exactly why the fugitives remained together, in 1933, archaeologists discovered 2 more bodies in a building known as the House of the Blacksmith. The victims are a young male and an older female, probably a son and his mother. The question is, why did they stay?
Come si vede dalle foto d'epoca, i 2 individui sono all'interno di quella che è la cenere rimasta, che è indicativa della fase del flusso piroclastico di S4, cioè quel flusso che entra a Pompei, scavalca le mura e uccide tutto ciò che era vivo in città, animali e uomini. E anche congela gli ultimi attimi delle vittime.
The woman was clinging to a chest, which contained 2 rings, while the male was lying on a bed. Examining his spine, Dr. Valeria Amoretti has found abnormalities.
Allora, questa è una vertebra lombare sana, dove appunto il corpo vertebrale ha una sua integrità ben visibile. Quest'altra invece è L4, poco più sotto all'interno della colonna vertebrale, presenta, vedete, questa grande lesione che è proprio tipica della tubercolosi, che va a intaccare proprio il corpo della vertebra, con poco, appunto, con poca reazione vertebrale.
With the male partially disabled by tuberculosis, perhaps he and his mother hoped to wait out the eruption.
Loro non sapevano quello che stava accadendo. Quindi le reazioni sono 2, o la fuga o il chiudersi in casa e aspettare che passi. In questo caso la scelta è stata la seconda.
Back at the dig, the team are clearing a large room in the new wealthy house. The brightly colored wall paintings suggest this was the home of a rich Pompeian.
Quando abbiamo iniziato a scavare il salone, già dagli inizi delle prime pitture, ci immaginavamo un pavimento a mosaico di rara bellezza.
Non sappiamo effettivamente cosa troveremo. L'aspettativa di trovare un qualcosa di integro, di ben conservato, il più possibile, di ottima fattura. Insomma, ci stanno tutte le premesse per che ciò accada, però finché non vedo, sono come San Tommaso, finché non vedo, non credo, quindi questa è la storia.
Oh, è Dio che rientra.
È un momento particolare perché dobbiamo stare attenti a non provocare danni a un pavimento che è stato conservato lì sotto per 2000 anni. Eccolo là, eccolo là, eccolo là.
Siamo, ragazzi.
Queste proprio delle tessere piccole.
Tessere piccole. E questo ci fuori pure qualche cosa in marmo, eh?
Pare che sia integro, eh?
Sembrerebbe a questo punto. Ok. Proprio bellino, eh? Tessere emotive piccoline.
Sì, ben conservato. Di ottima fattura.
E geometria spicciola.
Al momento possiamo dire che sono disegni geometrici.
Disegni geometrici.
Tieni presente che siamo ai piedi delle pareti, Quindi più andiamo verso il centro, più ci sono possibilità che ci sia un disegno più bello all'interno del centro del pavimento. Per la prima volta in questo scavo vediamo un pavimento a mosaico rispetto agli altre case che abbiamo scavate lungo via di Nola. Incominciamo anche a livello di decorazioni pavimentali ad avere dei risultati ben più importanti, più belli, più affascinanti. Ci rimanda sicuramente a un proprietario che era facoltoso e anche cultore del bello.
Gennaro? Siamo fortunati, guarda.
Cioè? Ah, una moneta?
Sì, sta proprio sul
le,
pavimento.
Le tessere. Wow. Che bello.
Guarda. È molto consunta, quindi si legge qualcosa, Che c'è il volto dell'imperatore è a sinistra. C'è la parte dell'iscrizione in esergo, qui una parte bassa. È probabile che questa moneta
abbia persa qualcuno del cantiere.
Sì.
È probabile.
E il caso ha voluto
che la trovassimo noi.
Che la trovassimo noi nel 2023.
Va bene, ok.
Vabbè, beh.
The discovery of a mosaic and the highly decorated walls suggests the owner enjoyed displaying his wealth.
Dunque, ciò che sento io che entro in questo ambiente avverto meraviglia, avverto stupore, perché è una sensazione di immensità che mi dà questa scena dipinta. Cioè io mi sento come se entrassi in un salone per le feste, che è quello che voleva trasmettere il proprietario di questa domus. Quindi impressionare, lasciare il messaggio che sei nel mio territorio e io ti faccio vedere io chi sono.
But the vibrant, brightly colored walls of the living room are in stark contrast to the room next door. Here, some truly extraordinary decorations are emerging from the pumice.
It's fascinating, the quality of the painting, extraordinary. And you see 3 figures, a dog, a hunting dog, which is also very, the details, the eyes, everything. And you see that, for example, her dress, it's almost transparent. And you see her expression, the hair. It's all very, very beautiful.
The scene is from Homer's Iliad. It shows Paris, the Prince of Troy, when he first meets Helen, the most beautiful woman of the Greek world.
It's kind of unique as a composition, right? And so they're saying, we are not using one of the typical mythological scenes, which are very, very common in Pompeii, but it's something, you know, a bit more special. And this shows also the education, the culture of the people who lived here, or pretend to have this culture, who knows, right? What's also interesting, it's all painted in black. This usually was 4 rooms which were being used in the winter. And so in the evening, you would have to use lamps. And the smoke of the lamps tended to blacken the walls. And so Vitruvius, the author, suggested, well, the rooms you're using in the winter, where you have to use lamps, paint them in black so you don't see the smoke on the walls.
On another wall, the god Apollo, complete with his lyre, is trying to seduce his priestess, Cassandra.
I think it often was, first of all, showing off one's education and, you know, culture.
And so you'd say, you know, I know Greek culture, I paint my house with Greek images. So you always have to imagine that this is being used during a practice which is social practice. People meet here, eat together, and often you have philosophical, political, cultural conversation.
The level of wealth and sophistication on display implies the owner of this property was a man of means and culture. And in the shrine room, more clues to his identity have emerged. A red painted inscription.
Dalle pareti circostanti questo ambiente fuoriescono le lettere, le vedete? E qua si vede benissimo una A, vedete una V, un'altra A. Ah, qua si vede addirittura una figura. Ora ripulisci qua. Quella è una chiara iscrizione dipinta sul muro. Tra l'altro molto particolare perché siamo in un ambiente di cucina, quindi interessante, una novità assoluta. Tu leggi una A, punto, un R, una V, un'altra A, e l'ultima è una D e questa una E. E poi sotto CPP e poi qua parte una figura.
Questo può essere anche una Q con...
Ah, sì.
Sì,
sembra
questa è la Q con la svirgolata finale. No, oro vos faciatis. È un'iscrizione elettorale. Chiedo a voi di votare per.
All'interno della cucina, della cucina. Forse stai facendo proprio poi portarla sulla strada.
Who is ARV? And why is he asking for votes? The team has already found his initials on the bakery's millstone. And now, a further inscription seems to finally reveal his identity.
So here we have A point, still abbreviated Aulum, Aulus, Aulum. And then we can read here Rustium. So this would be his kind of family name. And then you have Verum, that would be the last name. So we know that his name was actually Aulus Rustius Verus. And then we have again Edilem. Edilis is kind of the second highest office of the town. And then this strange form of three letters all merged into one, Oro vos faciatis. I ask you to vote to make him Edilis of the town. So we now know, thanks to this inscription, that his full name was Aulus Rustius Verus. Fantastic.
So, was Aulus Rustius Verus the owner of all these buildings, the laundry, the bakery, and a luxurious property with the imposing black room? As a well-known public figure, running for political office, owning a bakery would have given him an edge.
The thing is that in antiquity, they weren't so concerned about anti-corruption, and so they officially accepted that you could bribe voters. You could somehow buy votes. You can imagine that you could tell people, this bakery is supported by this great guy, Aulus Rustius Verus, and the bread you're buying, is so cheap, thanks to him also. So when you eat your daily bread, think of how wonderful a person he is and consider giving him your vote.
But the political career of Aulus Rustius Verus was cut short. The eruption of Vesuvius stopped everything in its tracks. And as the sixth and final pyroclastic flow buried what remained of the city, he, like Pompeii, was forgotten. "1,700 years later, the ancient city was rediscovered. Over the centuries, as its buildings, artifacts, and people slowly emerged from the pumice and ash, archaeologists began to write the story of Pompeii. This dig is a new chapter in that story. A year into the excavation of Insula 10, Gennaro, Alessandro, and the rest of the team are beginning to understand this extraordinary set of buildings and the people who lived here.
Pompeii, you know, it's always a fragmented history. But sometimes you can put together a little story. And we can get very close. You can see the dining rooms and bedrooms and even the bathrooms, and we can see how these people lived.
The team have uncovered Aulus Rustius Verus's thriving business empire, consisting of a bakery.
Chiaramente le grandezze è un forno commerciale.
And a high-class laundry, complete with 2,000-year-old plumbing.
Ed eccoci qui.
This is really fascinating because this is not your normal drain. This is a serious drain.
The team found both businesses connected to a lavishly decorated reception area, where the heavy marble furniture and bespoke frescoes showed to ARV's guests that he was a man of means. And a wall painting depicting the Greek myth of Achilles revealed ARV liked to parade his culture too.
Questo ambiente era il salone dove il gestore riceveva I clientes.
Behind both his bakery and laundry, the team are uncovering what could be ARV's extravagantly decorated home.
Chiaramente il livello qualitativo è degno delle migliori realizzazioni di Pompei. Questo è eccellente, eccezionale.
What is now clear is that at the time of the eruption, ARV's home and businesses were undergoing major renovation, as every room is full of building materials and tools.
Questa casa al momento non c'è traccia di vita quotidiana, ma c'è la presenza continua e in ogni singolo ambiente dell'attività di cantiere. Tant'è vero che poi il pavimento è in terra battuto, non è rifinito. Abbiamo 2 anfore tagliate, riempite da materiale per lavori di edilizia. Quindi la vita quotidiana è questo, l'operaio che dipinge, che costruisce, che ripara, l'operaio che porta le tegole nell'atrio e le ammassa e appunta sul pilastro il numero di tegole scaricate. Questo comunque ti racconta la vita quotidiana di questa casa.
But it is the discovery of the 3 crushed bodies close to the bakery that speaks to the real tragedy of the eruption of AD 79.
Mai scavato un essere umano ridotto così. È come se fosse diventato in 2D.
Perché questo è proprio il blocco.
The team believe these are the bodies of enslaved workers who perhaps sought shelter in the bakery. And a final phase of excavation has now revealed the full brutality of life for some of Pompeii's poorest.
Now it all falls into place, where both humans and animals become mere elements in some kind of factory mechanism. So we have to imagine they lived in these two rooms. And there's only one way out, and you take it if you have to deliver the bread. And it's this door.
The only exit from the bakery leads to the atrium, where the bakery manager would receive his guests.
So remember, the door is closed. You would not see the bakery. But there's one other opening, as far as we know, between the bakery and this room. And so you had this window here, but it was closed with iron bars. The house owner evidently wanted to avoid people crossing from inside the bakery to this part, because from here you had many ways to escape.
The enslaved workers may have been literally imprisoned inside the bakery.
There's little light, probably, little space. We have to imagine the dust of the flour here filling the air, and this very heavy, monotonous work all day long. And so it was one of the most terrible fates of destinies of slaves in antiquity to work in these bread bakeries.
Could it be that the victims, the two women and a child, weren't seeking shelter, but had no choice, and were trapped, unable to escape?
We see at the dark side of ancient slavery, where there is no trust, no promises of liberation. There's only the rude violence of forced labor.
"2,000 years after the eruption of AD 79, Vesuvius is still a dangerously active volcano. An ever-present threat, which every year unites the residents of Naples in prayer to keep them and their city safe.
È come se i pompeani e gli stessi napoletani fossero stati forgiati con gli stessi elementi. La paura, ma il coraggio di sovvertire la paura.
Despite the threat of another eruption, people are determined to stay here. Resilient in their love for their land.
Tu in una valigia puoi mettere un pantalone, una camicia, puoi mettere un ricordo, ma quello che non puoi mettere nella valigia, l'odore del mare, il profumo della mattina nel bar in cui prendi il caffè, lo stare assieme, l'amicizia. Quindi forse questa terra ti dà conto della precarietà della vita. E quindi forse l'insegnamento è quello di stare attenti e non perdersi nessun momento della propria vita. Viverlo sempre consapevolezza che può essere l'ultimo giorno e con la speranza che il giorno non finisca.
Would you like to explore Pompeii for yourself? Follow the links to the Open University, where you can embark on an interactive walkthrough of the ancient city. To find it, just go to bbc.co.uk/Pompeii and click on the link to the Open University.
This is the Appian Way, one of the roads that took thousands of Romans in and out of their capital city every day. Young and old, rich and poor, clean and dirty. And it's where I want to start, asking a question that really interests me. Who were the ancient Romans? Outside the city, it was lined with thousands and thousands of tombs. So before you got into the city of Rome, you'd already met the Romans. Dead ones, that is. And the lives of many of them began or ended a long way from Rome. This is just a tiny fragment of someone's tomb. Someone called Aeschylus. Occisus est in Lusitania. He was murdered in Spain. This lady's Ousia Prima, a priestess of the Egyptian goddess Isis. And there's her little sacred rattle. She's almost looking at you. I feel like saying, pleased to meet you, Prima. They come from every walk of life and every part of the empire, and a lot of them had once been slaves. These aren't the kind of guys we usually think of when we think of Romans. These Romans all lived at the centre of a vast empire that stretched from Spain to Syria and which dominated the Western world for over 700 years. Like it or not, ancient Rome is still all around us, in our roads, laws, and architecture. We keep on recreating it in film and fiction, and every year thousands of us trek here to see its monuments up close, and to imagine the emperors and the armies, the gladiators, and let's be honest, the gore. But hidden all over the modern city, in its walls, behind the facades, even under its streets, is something much harder to find, but just as captivating. The forgotten voices of the ordinary people. They're still there, if you know where to look. Calidius Eroticus means Mr. Hot Sex. This is a Roman ménage à trois. This wasn't just a mugging, this was mass murder. The Romans didn't just carve their names and dates on their tombstones. Keen never to be forgotten, they left their thoughts, their achievements, even entire life stories chiselled into stone. It's a unique record of real Roman lives. I've spent most of my life with the ancient Romans, and not just the big guys, the emperors, the politicians, the generals, the posh ones. The people I've most enjoyed getting to know are the ordinary ones, who had their own part to play in the story of this extraordinary city. And what gets to me every time is that we can still have a conversation with them, even 2,000 years later. In this series, I'm going to get their voices speaking again, to piece together a very different story of life in ancient Rome. I'll step behind the doors of their homes to meet flesh and blood Roman families, whose lives and possessions can reflect our own in surprising ways. This is something a bit special. She's not just Barbie, she's Empress Barbie. I'll go down into the streets where the dirt, crime, sex and humour in everyday Roman life shows us what it was like to live in an ancient city of 1 million people. Baths, wine and sex, he said, ruin your body. True. but they're what makes life really worth living. But I'll start by telling the real story of Imperial Rome, looking beyond the violence and spectacle to find a global city which reached for talent and treasure from the far ends of the earth, a place where everything and everyone was from somewhere else. These are the Romans I'm interested in. Welcome to my Rome. When you arrived in Rome at its imperial height 2,000 years ago, you found yourself in a new kind of city. Rome had once been a small city-state, but in conquest after conquest, it became capital of a vast empire. A place in which, for the first time in history, 1 million people from 3 continents managed to live together. One thing we know about Rome is it wasn't just a city, it was an empire. And for us, that means marauding armies, conquering generals, and bloodthirsty emperors. We tend not to think about the ordinary people who lived here at the very heart of it all. For them, the empire brought them into contact with the whole world, from Scotland to Afghanistan. And it made this city a more cosmopolitan place than anywhere had ever been before or would be again for hundreds of years. And we're always asking, what did the Romans do for us? I think we should be asking, what did the empire do to the Romans? And who were those Romans anyway? Around the city, there's more evidence than you'd think for the impact that Roman conquest had on the lives of ordinary people here. All it requires is that we look from a slightly different angle. One of the most famous monuments in the Forum celebrates the moment when one conquering army came home. In 71 AD, the city got a day off for the triumphal return of the Emperor Vespasian and his son Titus, who had crushed a rebellion in Judea. We've got here the victorious general, Titus, driving through the streets of Rome in his chariot to celebrate his victory. And on the other side, we've got the booty that he's brought home with him. Titus had devastatingly conquered the Jews, and here we can see the loot that he has got from the Jewish temple. It's a grand display. But what I want to do is try and undercut the pomposity of it a bit, and to ask, what was it like for the people, the ordinary Romans, who showed up to watch this, left their apartments and came to see the spectacle? A triumph like this would have been the first sight the Roman people had of all the things the armies brought back from their distant victories. The rich spoils, the maps of the conquered territory, the models of the fighting, even the trees that they'd uprooted and brought back to Rome. How did people react? Some must have gasped, others would have jeered the captives, or maybe their minds were on other things. One Roman poet recommends the triumphal procession as a place to pick up a girl. How would you do it? Well, he says, watch the stuff go past, nudge up to her and say, oh, I think that's the Euphrates there, and that's the Tigris over there. You don't have to know, he says, you just have to sound confident. And then you'll make your own conquest. It's a good joke, but it also hints at the way Roman lives could be changed by the spoils coming back from the empire. This girl can't have been the only person who found all this pretty strange, but also exciting. So what did the Roman armies bring back from the empire? The import that made the biggest impact is one we don't think about often enough: human beings. These are forgotten people, But if we take the time to listen, we can still hear the voices of some of the millions who followed the Roman armies into the city for all sorts of different reasons. This is for my brother, Habibi Anu from Palmyra. I'm Germanus, Regulus's mule driver. This is for Diocles, champion chariot racer from Spain. Here we've got a young slave girl, aged 17, Phryne, the slave of Tortulla, Africana. She came from Africa. This one is put up by a soldier for his wife Carnuntilla, born near Vienna in ancient Pannonia. What's weird is that Carnuntilla isn't really a real name. It comes from the name of a town in Pannonia, Carnuntum. It means sort of my babe from Carnuntum. So my guess is he perhaps bought this girl as a slave. He freed her. He brought her back to Rome. He married her. But sadly, his babe from Carnuntum died when she was just 19. Poignant stories like this are everywhere in the city. They remind us of the different ways real lives could begin abroad and end in Rome. But there's more to it than that. These people weren't just brought in to serve the Romans, they were becoming Romans. One of the tombs on the Appian Way gives us the other side of the story of the Arch of Titus. It's a tombstone of 3 guys, one called Barica, one called Zabda, and one called Akiba. Typical Jewish names. So the question is, what's the story of Barica, Zabda, and Akiva? How did they get here? If they did start out life in Judea, how come they end up as Roman citizens in Rome? It's more surprising than you think. To judge from the letters and how they're written on this stone, this was carved in the 1st century AD. And at that point, we can put 2 and 2 together. I'm almost certain that these 3 men must have been part of the Jewish rebellion against the Romans in the late 60s AD. These men surely came into Rome with Titus's army as prisoners of war. It must have seemed like the worst moment of their lives. Jeered at, cat calls, people throwing things at them. But perhaps worse was